And for our fans who don't know, so you had a show that would come on, and I think this was like 2 years ago, early in the morning, man, during the week. So my dad and I, we coach at the same high school, and we leave early in the morning. So we're riding up the road at 5:30 in the morning and listening to your show every single day. And then your dad's show would come on like right after.
And that was the one thing I found out is, as years went on at ESPN, I got them to let me do more and more stuff. I started off on those weekend shows. Like a year and a half later, I started on that 4 to 6 a.m. show. Going through that, you quickly realize the only people up at 4 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast are football coaches or coaches of any kind going in, early risers who like to work out, and other people that work in sports media. So like those are the people. When I was getting on college football calls, when I was calling games later on, I would talk to coaches and they're like, oh yeah, I listen to you on First and Last all the time when I'm, going into work out or riding into the office. So now you're talking to, offensive coordinators at Navy or DCs at all these schools that, hear you because you're the only thing on at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Talk a little bit about your schedule. I'm sure that like sleep schedule and work schedule is different, man.
It is. And I did First and Last, that 4 to 6 a.m. show with a guy by the name of Robin Lundberg, who works at SI now, but he had been doing that time slot locally in New York. And then he and I started doing it nationally when I got on board. And he was the first person I called. I was like, how do you do it? And he goes, you break it up into 2 parts. And so I would sleep for 2 or 3 hours at night before I would wake up at 3 a.m., a little before that. And then I would come back home after that and I would nap for a couple hours. And then usually I was going to do, try and get a little bit on College Football Live or see where I could just pull stuff. I was kind of doing odd jobs around the building. And so it was a little helter-skelter then as I added, the morning show and started to do more when Mike and Mike became Golic and Wingo, and started to do more on there. And I started to do more in college football. The days got a little bit longer, but it's something. And my dad always says this, you never get used to the alarm going off at 4 alarm first goes off in the morning. But you sort of find that routine and find what works for you and just try and make it work.
Sure. So I guess one of my questions, and I'm pretty sure our fans would like to know too, is just like, what is the everyday like in an ESPN studio? Like, like how is it? Like, how do you all come in? Do y'all pre-record? Do you all, like how does it work as far as like y'all background, all the setup? Like talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, and it's really interesting and different for different shows. Like for us over on radio's got its own, like ESPN, when we first moved to Connecticut in 1998, when my dad was starting there, ESPN was essentially 3 buildings. ESPN, I think, has 16 buildings. It's like a full-scale college campus now. It's massive. And so radio's got its own building. We've got the buildings where the Sports Center and NFL Live sets are. And there are these big, wild studios with all these different moving parts that you see on TV. And for us over in radio, it's a little more pared down than that, which is nice. But we'll come in every day. And for us, a lot of the work, because we're the first show on in the morning now, is done at night. So we've got an email that goes out that our producers start sending. We got a Google document that lives and breathes all day. And so if you see something, say something. If there's something interesting, all the people on our staff are throwing ideas into this. And so you spend a lot of the day reading and just making sure you're kind of up to date. Like I always say, like, you got to have the bare bones of every sports day sort of ironed out so that as things change, you can just add muscle or add more meat to whatever spot you need to over the course of that time period. And so we'll have a rough idea, around 8 o'clock at night before, because that's when a lot of our producers will go to bed because they got to be in it, sometimes 2 o'clock in the morning, even earlier than we do for the other parts of their job. And so that'll get sent out at 8. We'll have a rough idea. And then, I'll stay up and watch, whatever games are on because I'm kind of a night owl by nature. And then we get in the morning, and the first thing we do is, when we were going into the studio, now it's a little bit different, but when we were going into the studio, we get in there around 5 for the show to start at 6. And we would just say, all right, did something happen overnight that we need to lead the show with? Because part of our show is we're the morning news for people when it comes to sports.
Yeah, sure.
We got to put information out there and certainly present it well, have our opinions, make it fun. But we also have to give people that information as they go into the day. And so once we get that and kind of know who our guests are, you start to sort of build this structure of the show. And then you get to fill in the parts with, all right, this is what I'm really interested or really hot on coming off of this. Or, hey, we had a good talk during the pre-show meeting and that really sparked a discussion. Let's put that here where a lot of people are going to get to see or hear it and all that. And you build the show out for 4-hour show, we'll build out like the first hour and a half, 2 hours. And then you just go through and you sort of read and react. And that's the fun part, is getting inside the body of the show. And then it becomes kind of like, a live sporting event or sports again, where you got a plan and then you adjust as things happen. Well, all right, we had some more news come in. We're going to run with that this segment. Or, man, we had a really good discussion before. Let's run that back because we got a whole new audience that comes during this hour of the show. And so then you get to the adjustments and all that. We get to the post show. We kind of recap everything, start to, lay the groundwork for here's a couple guests we had in mind for tomorrow. And then, you just sort of go about the rest of the day that same way.
That's awesome. And I just wanted to get that perspective from you because it's a lot like how we do on our podcast, just it's how we interact and how we bring things to our audience. So I just think that was good for our fans to hear and for us to hear. I appreciate it, Mike.
Because a lot of people think guys on ESPN and women too, everybody who's employed on any kind of talk show, Fox Sports, CBS, they think, oh, well, they just get up there and just talk about whatever. They don't understand that there's a level of preparation and professionalism that goes into it behind the scenes that the average fan and average listener never see, Yeah. So I appreciate you shedding light on that, on what really goes into just making a daily show.
And I'm sure because even my mindset was set as it a little bit, just because I always wanted to be in the broadcasting, but I'm still learning about it. But we're like, wow, I would love to just get paid to talk about football. But it's way more than that though, Mike. It's so much more that's kind of like somebody making a stereotype. Wow, I would love to get paid to play football. It's way, and as I know, it's way more than that. So I know it's a lot more for you all than just going up there and talking sports. You have to have a plan and you have to have a backup plan for if something, and you have to be able to analyze yourself. I feel like as an analyst, the best way to analyze is being able to analyze yourself. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. And that's probably the biggest difference between doing this and playing ball, because this, if you take the wrong steps and miss a block, you're going to hear about it 10 seconds later from a coach with a whistle and a really loud voice and a burr up his ass. That's kind of how it always goes with that. Here, we got an HR department. They can't yell at you like that at this. You can't give me that sort of instant feedback. So you got to chase it down a lot more. You have to find people that you trust in the building that you can ask, hey, can you put an extra ears on this? Can you tell me what you're hearing in this, and try and really track down that feedback and a lot of that? Because you're right. It's one of those things where it is like football in the fact that it's only reps that make you better. You got to do it a lot. You got to do it often, and getting in front of a mic every day was such a huge help for me. But then the different part is you have to chase the feedback. You don't have a coach that's paid there to just give it to you like that all the time. You have to go and seek that out and find it.
You have to do it yourself.
So give us a little insight, Mike, maybe some funny stories, or who at ESPN is hilarious, that, or something that most people may not know, whether it's Stephen A or Trey Wingo, anybody like that.
Yeah. So I would say, I Mina Kimes is someone I've been fortunate to become pretty good friends with over the course of the last few years. And the thing that I found out about Mina that is kind of like my dad is they're both sneaky good at a lot of things. My dad was never a great dynamic athlete when it came to football, but he's athletic enough to be good at everything. He just decided to take up golf this last year, and he's already shooting in the low 80s. He was always good at ping pong. He was a wrestler, so he just walks around kind of playing leverage games with you and stuff. He's really good at math, just all this random stuff that he just holds over everyone else. Mina, in addition to being a brilliant NFL analyst for us and a great podcast host, is also dynamite with an Etch-a-Sketch in her hands, does an awful DMX impression.
What?
Oh, dude, I promise you.
I gotta hear this.
I'll send you guys some tweets of Mina's very famous now DMX impression that she has done on air is pretty remarkable. But I would say her, and then the other one that comes to mind, someone asked me this the other day, who's one of the best, party time hangs at ESPN? And I always tell people, Elle Duncan is always, the person I have the most fun with. She's one of our Sports Center anchors. And it's when I see Elle outside of work, she's always a really good time. She's super easy. She's ATL through and through. So she's such an easy hang. But then when we do work together, I would do a digital show with her, and I had to catch myself probably 4 or 5 times. We're doing a Twitter stream. And I told her after, I was like, Elle, I get too comfortable hanging out with you. I almost said the F word on this live broadcast 5 different times. Like, you just feel like proximity cool by being around L, and so you drop your guard in a way that is dangerous when you're in front of a hot mic.
What's up?
So I know some of our friends want to know too, and I listen to this show as well. Golic, give me some Stu Gotz material. Give me some Stu Gotz story. I know you guys used to do weekend observations with him.
Oh yeah, Stu Gotz used to in weekend observations. So it was a 7 to 9 a.m. Sunday morning radio show. Which how they convinced Stu Gotz, who had been already at that point doing Le Batard show for like 12 or 13 years at that point, was one of the biggest voices at our network. That show has always been so big. How they convinced him to do a 7 to 9 a.m. Sunday morning radio show is still beyond me. But I'll never forget, we would do that, and I would get into the studio in Bristol, 45 minutes before that one, because it's a little less planning. It's a 2-hour show. We're going to mostly be reacting to college football and previewing NFL, or so I thought. Stu Gotz would dial in from his home radio unit 5 minutes before the show would start, and all you would hear come over the speaker is, because he was always like a little bit hungover, and I was always like a little bit hungover in that situation because it's Sunday morning and I was like 26 at that point. And Stu Gotz is a degenerate, so of course he was rolling in the same way. But it just you learn to do like the most effortless version of radio, and that was the one thing Stu and I figured out quick. The first time I met Stu Gotz in person, because I had been a fan of the Le Batard show for so long, like I LeVar Ball spoke it into existence or tweeted it into existence. Like basically firing off tweets like, I would love to work with Stu Gotz, like to do something with him. Someone at ESPN must have seen that because we did a 28-hour fantasy football marathon, and ESPN does that every year. And someone had the idea of, let's have Mike Golic Jr. and Stu Gotz on Fantasy Island. We're in front of a green screen for 28 hours just doing the most random BS you can think of. And so the first time I met Stu Gotz and spent any meaningful time with him, we were locked in a studio for 28 hours together.
Oh.
You learn so much. Like I always said, I learned a lot about my tattoo artist over the course of sitting for ink, because you're there for like 11 or 12 hours. We were there for 28 hours. And so I got the full show of Stu Gotz walking around the studios, finger wagging at everybody.
Sausage fingers.
Is the sausage finger wag was out in full force. But the thing is with Stu Gotz is he's such a nice guy, and he does so genuinely want to help everyone else that he would sit around with, production assistants, because he came up from that side. Like he was a production assistant. He worked the boards. He
started from the bottom.
And he ended up running 790 The Ticket in Miami, like as the programming director there on that side for a while. So he's done like every job you can do in radio. And so he genuinely has a lot of great advice for people. And that's what I always tell people is Stu Gotz, does a lot of work to play the fool on air. And don't get me wrong, he is a degenerate. He's a huge degenerate. He will say he's going to call you and do it 3 weeks later. Like all those things are true. But he is also like a very, very intelligent radio mind. He gets the medium, and he is always willing to lend a helping hand, be someone that people can talk to, and will advocate for people, and has definitely helped me a ton since I started here.
Actually, that's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Those guys are hilarious, by the way.
78 hours.
Dude, that whole crew now.
8 hours with Stu.
Dude, what was crazy is we had it easy because like we were 78, we were there for 28 hours of being jackasses. Like we're in front of a green screen doing whatever we want. Like Matthew Berry and Field Gates and Adam Schefter had to do actual sports hits every hour of that marathon, like talking competently about fantasy football. I swear I saw Shefty turn green at some point during that. Like these guys are sleep deprived. They're trying so hard. We found some random shower that no one knew existed over in the TV building, and everyone's just taking turns going down there at like 4 o'clock in the morning, trying to just scrub some dignity back onto ourselves. It was wild.
That's crazy though, yo. Like, and people don't think of that, You thinking of waking up in the morning, just listening to these guys, just like talk about what they love to talk about. You don't think about the whole grind that goes into it, all the hours you spend preparing and prepare your minds and making sure you have the right things that you want to talk about. It's a lot of preparation that goes into what you guys do.
Sure. It is, but it's also cool because like we get to do it with so many other like great people and all this. Like I just get to like casually now rattle off like Adam Schefter and Woj and Mina and Dominique Foxworth and all these people that are like these brilliant analysts. Some of them had great NFL careers. Like when I got to Pittsburgh, like Ryan Clark was the dude and the veteran on that team. Like it was him and Troy Polamalu in that safety room. RC had been there for so many years, was so loved by everyone.